Hi, I'm Fabio Carrera, the founder and director of the Venice Project Center. I started the center in 1988, being a native of Venice, just 4 years after I graduated from WPI with my bachelor's in electrical and computer engineering. Since 1988, we brought over 800 WPI students to Venice to work on over 250 research projects on all issues affecting the city and its citizens. Over the 3 decades, we were able to study everything from the canals of Venice to bridges to pedestrian traffic to boat traffic, the preservation of heritage in the city, from public art to museum art pieces, creating all kinds of databases and maps of the situation that we found over the years. Most recently, this year, on the 30th anniversary of the Venice Project Center, we have acquired a new space in Venice, a former church of Saints Cosmas and Damian in the Giudecca island of the city, a church that, as you can see, has been rehabbed to host an incubator called H3. And what we're doing right now is to continue in our process of contributing to the city's preservation and development by creating jobs in the city based on the 30 years of data collected. So we have 10 startups that we want to start in Venice, and the WPA teams have been collaborating with some of these in the past years. And for the next 10 years, we plan to create over 100 jobs in the city by creating 10 startups at least of 10 people each, all in some way related to issues studied by WPI students in the past 30 years. WPI teams will be hosted in H3 from now on. So the 30th anniversary of the Project Center, which starts in B term of 2018 and ends in B term 2019, will be a celebration of the impacts that we can make in the city and we have made in the city, but also looking at the future and how we can turn all this research into actual solutions made in Venice by Venetians to solve the problems of Venice, and then hopefully use Venice as our testimonial to resell these same solutions to other historic cities of the world. So we hope that students from WPI will continue to find Venice a very challenging and interesting place to come and do their IQP in, and hope to see you all in Venice soon. Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the streaming presentations of the research projects that WPI students produced in 2021 in Venice. I'm going to switch to Italian really briefly and then go back to English. Grazie a tutti per esservi collegati in questa sessione streaming delle tesi degli studenti del Venice Project Center di quest'anno. 2 parole in italiano per poi tornare all'inglese, dato che le presentazioni saranno tutte in inglese. 2 parole su dove siamo e cosa facciamo. Ringrazio tutti quelli che sono qui in questa bellissima sede, che è l'ex chiesa dei Santi Cosma e Damiano della Giudecca, che adesso è un incubatore di impresa che si chiama Fabbrica H3. Gli studenti che state per vedere sono la seconda rappresentano la seconda parte delle 7 tesi prodotte quest'anno. Le prime 3 le abbiamo già presentate venerdì scorso, le potete vedere in registrazione sul nostro canale YouTube. Questi sono tutti studenti di un'università che si chiama Worcester Polytechnic Institute, WPI, del Massachusetts, e questi sono gli ultimi 26 studenti di una lunga serie di studenti che vengono a Venezia dal 1988 per contribuire alla rinascita e al ripopolamento di questa città. Io sono Fabio Carrera, fondatore del Venice Project Center e anche di Serendipity, che è la società benefit che ha avuto in concessione e in partenariato col Comune questa sede bellissima in cui siamo quest'oggi. Le tesi che state per vedere sono state, sono state supervisionate da due professori, tra cui io stesso e il professor Bill Michelson, sempre del WPI. Le presentazioni sono scansionate ad orari specifici per permettere a chi è interessato a una tesi specifica di collegarsi solo per vedere quella. Quindi ci saranno delle pause in mezzo tra una presentazione e l'altra. Adesso passo all'inglese. Welcome everyone. Sorry about the introduction in Italian. This is the last of the 2 days of presentations of the research projects produced by WPI students this year in Venice. This is the last of many groups that came to Venice since 1988. We've brought over about 800 students from WPI over the 3+ decades. And we presented the first 3 projects on Friday, and you can watch those on our YouTube channel. And if you're connected here today, you're going to be witnessing the last 4 that were produced this year by students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute in Massachusetts. And they were supervised by myself and by Professor Bill Michelson of the Robotics Department of WPI. Whereas last Friday's presentations were mostly revolving around tourism and the creation of jobs in Venice, today's presentations are mostly about the environment, and we're going to be witnessing some great presentations by 4 teams today, and they will be from the US via Zoom.
Hello. We are a group of students analyzing the impacts of climate change in Venice and have developed models of extreme climate events to enhance preparedness for the future. My name is Everett Wanson. This is Katie Woodland. This is Kira Coulard. And our 4th partner, Will Stottlemyre, will be joining us via Zoom.
Due to its location on the Adriatic Sea, the historic city of Venice is subject to strong winds from Africa, as you can see in the image on the left, and powerful storms. These storms and wind patterns cause very large changes in the tide height of the Venetian Lagoon. Strong winds combined with low elevation, the historic city is exceptionally vulnerable to flooding and tide increases. Piazza San Marco is only 0.64 meters above the sea level and is the most affected location during floods. Throughout our project, we have gained much support from our sponsors at the Euro-Mediterranean Center for Climate Change, or CMCC. This group is dedicated to exploring the causes and effects of extreme events in order to assess the climate crisis. This group provided us with the majority of the necessary data when used performing our simulation. The frequency of flooding events has sharply increased in Venice's recent history. When the tide exceeds its normal height by 1.1 meter, it is categorized as an aqua alta or high water. As you can see in the graph, the frequency of specifically aqua altas has been increasing specifically over the last century. Venice has a long history of flooding, with the first recorded aqua alta in the year 782 CE. There have been many more instances of extreme tidal events over the course of history. Over the last half-century, the severity of these floods has significantly increased. The top 10 largest floods to occur in Venice have all occurred in the last 70 years. The highest tide to affect Venice occurred in 1966, rising to 1.94 meters and flooding 84% of the city. Indicated by the diagram, in each of these highest 10 tides, the city of Venice was more than 60% flooded. The Aqua Alta of 1966 was a record-breaking tide. This flood sparked ideas for methods of mitigating the damages of high tides to the city. As you can see on the left, Piazza San Marco is entirely flooded during this Aqua Alta. On the right is a photo of tides flowing over top of the seawall on the barrier island of Palestrina. The 1966 flood sparked the need for reliable mitigation measures. The Mosa Gates, first conceived in 1987, would effectively close the Venetian lagoon off from the Adriatic Sea. To raise each of the 78 gates across the Lido, Malamocco, and Chioggia inlets, they are individually filled with compressed air, which pushes seawater out. This allows the gates to become buoyant and rise above the water on their hinge. The Mosa Gates were designed to prevent tides up to 3 meters.
The second highest tide to affect Venice occurred in 2019, with waters rising to 1.87 meters and flooding spanning across 81% of the city. Water heights of this magnitude caused nearly €1 billion in damage and completely halted all aspects of life in the city. As sea levels continue to rise and climate events only get worse, Venice will continue to see an increase in both the average tide height and the frequency of acqua altas. Mosa, first raised in October 2020, has already protected Venice a total of 30 times in just over a year. In the future, we should expect to see an increase in the number of times Mosa will be utilized over the course of a year. However, Mosa is already seeing problems regarding corrosion and sediment buildup. Since the gates are currently the only way to stop tides from entering the lagoon, maintenance of the operating system will become extremely important. As climate continues to change, the ability to model the effectiveness of these mitigation measures is crucial to understanding the effectiveness against extreme climate events. This leads into our project, where we explored and improved an interface capable of simulating and replicating these extreme climate events in the Veneto region. Our interface of choice, SimTable, has and will continue to be used and further developed to help model extreme climate events. SimTable integrates a multitude of different geographic information systems, GIS, to help create a tangible interface capable of modeling disaster scenarios. SimTable serves as a great visual aid because of its ability to model simulations in 3 dimensions using sand. The SimTable is used primarily for modeling wildfires, chemical spills, and water scenarios. With these capabilities, SimTable is emerging as an invaluable tool to help educate both emergency responders and the public on how to deal with both man-made and climate-related disaster scenarios, and is now installed in over 130 locations around the world. This map currently shows where over 100 SimTables have been installed. The other 30 locations which were more recently installed are not displayed on this map, such as Venice.
The physical setup of the SimTable includes a projector stand, which supports a Mac Mini, a projector, and a camera. The table contains crushed walnut shells, which represents the sand. SimTable also uses AnyHazard as the software to model events. SimTable integrates spatial data such as elevation values and fuel types into AnyHazard. So for a fire, the algorithm iterates through each pixel in a process called rate of spread. This is based on the wind, slope, and fuel type. The fire moves to the next pixel when a certain amount of time has elapsed. Seen on the right is the result of combining the data layers with the algorithm. Here is the main interface for AnyHazard. The menu to the right includes options to create different simulations for fire, water, and toxic gases. At the bottom of the interface, the user can create different scenarios. A location can be used as the basis of a map scenario, or the sand can be shaped and scanned by the camera to detect elevation values as a new sand scenario. The user can also change the type of map being displayed using the Map Layers button. Possible map layers include Esri imagery, as shown, an Esri base map, or elevation shading. The clipboard function opens a QR code and allows the map scenario to be opened on a phone, laptop, or tablet, so the simulation can be controlled remotely. As mentioned previously, SimTable has developed an extremely advanced wildland fire module. The button to model a fire simulation is shown here. This module includes options to place fire barriers and emergency response teams on the map. The main buttons used when creating our team's simulations include the tanker, the dozer, and the crew. The simulation above displays a fire in the northern Veneto region. A fire is drawn in a yellow line across the screen. Crews, tankers, and dozers are deployed to help mitigate the fire. As the simulation is resumed and zoomed in, you can see how the mitigation measures have stopped sections of the fire. Any hazard also includes a hazmat module, which is used to create chemical spills. The button to model a toxic gas simulation is shown here. The user can specify the type of gas released from the options on the left. The main hazmat module includes options to add a sensor or an emitter. Using the clipboard, the user can set a protective action zone, they can create evacuation routes, and add any hazard markers to the map. Here we see a plume simulation showing an approximation of where a cloud of gas would travel in the historic city. See how the plume changes direction when the wind dial rotates. Any hazard also includes a water module designed for rainstorms, dam releases, and watersheds. The button to model a water simulation is shown here. There are different size options for the watershed feature and for setting the size of the rainstorm. Using the clipboard, the user can control the water height in whole feet for the release function. Our team modeled a heavy rainstorm at the location of the Viant Dam. In the simulation, we can see how droplets of water pool in areas of low elevations. We also used the release feature to model the tragic break of the Viant Dam that occurred in 1963. The water is released from the site of the dam and flows into areas of lower elevations as the simulation progresses.
For our simulations, we used the release function because it most closely mimicked the way that the tides act. These simulations show floods of St. Mark's Square. From this, we can see that in the 90-centimeter tide, showed on the left, some pathways flood, but the square itself remains dry, while in the 180-centimeter tide, shown on the right, the entire square is underwater. This is nearly the height of the 2019 flood, when certain parts of the basilica were in seawater for over 24 hours, damaging the marble structure. These two simulations are of Giudecca, centered around where the project center is located. Left, the 90-centimeter tide floods pathways nearest to the edge of the island, but many streets remain clear. Right, the 180-centimeter tide floods most streets and courtyards, putting a very large portion of the island underwater. The barrier islands to the lagoon, Lido and Palestrina, have a slightly higher elevation than the historic city, which reduces the amount of minor flooding that they experience. However, these islands are the main defense for the historic city, and therefore a flood wall, the Marazzi, was built on the seaside of most of Lido and all of Palestrina. The image on the left shows in dark blue which areas of a section of the Lido are at or under 125 centimeters in elevation, and on the right shows which areas are at or under 187 centimeters. It is important to note, however, that this is not a simulation, and therefore some of the areas that appear flooded do not actually have a clear path for the water to reach there. Maintenance for Moza will be increasingly important as sea level rises and we see an increase in the frequency the gates are raised. Already, after only 10 years in the water, the hinges are rusting, despite the fact that they were predicted to last 100 years. Moza is not the answer to the flooding issue, but is only a temporary fix until a true solution can be found. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change uses historical observations to predict sea level rise. On this graph, we see 3 different trend lines based upon concentration of greenhouse gases and the resulting impacts. Currently on this graph, we are here. We know that tides near 2 meters are possible from the 2019 and 1966 floods, and Moza is designed to protect against tides of up to 3 meters. This leaves room for a 1 meter increase in global mean sea level before we start to see tides that are higher than Moza can protect against. Currently, greenhouse gas emissions continue to increase, and therefore we could see this within the next 90 years. If greenhouse gas emissions are able to stabilize before the year 2100, we could still see a 1 meter increase in sea level before the year 2200. In the best case scenario, where emissions reach zero before 2100, we'd be unlikely to see tides higher than MOSA could handle before the year 2300. If the MOSA gates were to overflow, the lagoon would then experience a 3-meter tide. This simulation shows what that would look like in an area of the historic city. SimTable is currently used to educate first responders to wildfires, mainly in western United States as well as Australia. If expanded to Italy, simulations of fires in areas of high risk could also be used to train first responders here. If the water functions continue to be developed, it could also be used to educate the public in areas at high flood risk. Venice is a prime example, but many other locations of Italy also experience floods. SimTable would show which areas would be affected first, allowing people to prepare before damage occurs. On the left is a QR code for our team website, which contains more details about our project, and on the right is a QR code for the simulation repository, which has the simulations from this presentation and also longer videos that were not featured here. This brings us to the end of the presentation. We thank you for your time and interest. We'll now open up the floor to any questions, or you could send any of us an email later. If there are no questions at this time, we can take small groups to see the SimTable in action.
Just a note for those who are following us from the streaming channel, you can put questions or comments in the chat and we will read them to the teams. But before we start the next presentation at 4:45, we have a bit of time, and so those of you who want to can go and see the SimTable in the next room. And we'll pause until then. Thank you again.
riesci a come visioni?
Welcome back to the presentations of the 2021 cohort of WPI students who were in Venice for 2 months this year to produce their 7 research projects, and we're going to be watching the second of the 4 that we're doing today in a moment. I just want to remind everyone that all the results of these presentations and the results of the projects will be online in about 10 days or so in the final form, so that everybody can go and see them after the fact. And all these recordings will also be posted on our YouTube channel for people who want to watch them afterwards. Without further ado, we'll move straight to the next team, the team that worked on the Climathon this year, and will give us their assessment of how to make Climathons work even better in the future, so that the Climathons can create startups that can be located in Venice and create jobs.
Hello everyone, and welcome. Our team has been working with Venice Calls to develop a repeatable event framework for the Climathon event here in Venice, Italy. My name is Dylan Rappaport. This is Anna Hickman, Christina Vakian, and Megan Latendra. A Climathon is an event similar to a hackathon where teams work together to come up with ideas to solve problems related to climate change and our impact on the planet. These Climathons are organized on a global scale by Climate KIC and on a local level by smaller community-based organizations. In addition to helping to solve problems relating to climate change, Climathons can also help to create new jobs in the form of startup businesses that emerge from ideas generated at local events. Many other Climathons have been successful in creating startups out of the ideas generated at their events. For example, Woola is a startup that was created in Tallinn, Estonia, that works to reduce plastic waste by replacing plastic packaging with a packaging made from leftover sheep wool. The first Venice Climathon was actually in 2016 and was hosted by the Euro-Mediterranean Center on Climate Change, or CMCC. It has been hosted by Venice Calls since 2019, and after their team won the 2018 event at the national level. Since 2016, there have been 6 editions of the event, 162 total participants, and 33 different projects, all of which are housed within a Climathon Venice archive that we will speak more about later. With all of these different ideas, it is obvious that the Climathon Venice has the potential to come up with great ideas. However, only 2 of them, idInsect and iGringo, were able to successfully turn their ideas into startups. As I mentioned before, Climathons are geared towards creating ideas to help fight climate change. Venice's position in the Venetian lagoon and extremely low elevation has it on the forefront of climate change, and thus is a great location for a Climathon. One prime example of this is the aqua alta, or high tide phenomena, experienced in the city, periodically submerging sections of it underwater, and rising sea levels will only make this problem worse. The recent creation of the Mosa barrier system has greatly reduced the amount of aqua altas experienced in Venice, but it can only hold back tides to a certain extent. Our sponsor, Venice Calls, has worked to help mitigate some effects of climate change in Venice through their goal of making Venice a sustainable city. They primarily operate through volunteer work, but also coordinate cultural activities and educational opportunities to help enhance Venice. Just as Venice faces challenges posed by our changing climate and human impact on the environment, its economy has also become dependent on tourism. As can be seen, nearly 2/3 of jobs in the historic city are related to tourism, primarily consisting of jobs in transportation, restaurants, and retail shops. This lack of jobs outside the tourism sector is also one factor contributing to the decline of permanent residential population. This is where the benefit corporation Serendipity comes into play. They work to create new jobs in Venice by supporting startups, many of which are combinations of digital and traditional work that will help to keep Venice's job market modernized and independent of tourism. These 2 organizations have complementary goals and have come together to collaborate to help accomplish their similar goal of job creation and the development of a sustainable city model. This collaboration was born in 2020 with the joint organization of the Venice Climathon. Primarily hosted by Venice Calls, it is housed right here in Serendipity's H3 factory. As I mentioned, the Climathon has helped to create 2 startups, but has not produced the amount that Venice Calls and Serendipity have been hoping for. The main challenge now is to determine what factors are important to bridge the gap between the Climathon and the creation of successful startups. This leads us to our team's mission, which was to develop a repeatable event framework that will increase the long-term viability of startups produced at the event.
In order to understand how to bridge this gap, we investigated how similar events to the Climathon Venice were successful. We investigated the Climathon in Tallinn, Estonia, the Climathon in Zurich, Switzerland, the first Game Jam, the Combat Robotics Hackathon. We interviewed robotics event coordinator Colleen Shaver, and lastly, we investigated the WPI Innovation Challenge. After investigating similar events, we analyzed the planning cycles of all of the past editions of the Climathon Venice starting from 2016. As you can see, for the years 2016 to 2020, the planning cycle was split into 2 phases. The first phase, preparation, began in August and extended until the Climathon weekend. The second phase was the Climathon weekend itself, in late October or early November. It is important to note that throughout these past 5 editions, as Dylan mentioned, there were 2 ideas that were developed into startups. The 2016 Climathon Venice produced the startup iGreenGo, and in 2020, the Climathon Venice produced the startup itInsect. After analyzing the planning cycles of the previous 5 editions, we analyzed the 2021 Climathon Venice planning cycle. In contrast to the past 5 editions, the 2021 planning cycle was structured in 3 phases. The first phase, preparation, began in August. During the preparation stage, 3 pre-events took place. The first was Vino Kilo. The second was MIT Design X. And the third was Fab Lab Venezia. All 3 pre-events related to the theme of Restart Venice, and looked to teach participants about the necessary skills for idea cultivation and startup development. During this time, the WPI team arrived in Venice. After we moved into the second phase of the planning cycle, the Climathon weekend, which took place on October 30th and 31st. During the weekend, we developed full observation sheets for each section and category of the event, and then actively observed the full 2 days. We also developed entry and exit surveys whose QR codes were located in the booklet we created for the event, and asked participants to fill both of those out before and after the event. The QR codes for both the entry and exit survey can be found here. The 4 main takeaways from our active observation and entry and exit surveys are as follows. We observed that there were technical difficulties during the speaker and final presentations with the projector and microphone, and that there were setup plans that were not executed. And as a takeaway, we realized that we needed to define a period for organizers to practice the technical and overall setup days before the actual event. Next, we observed that there was no defined structure for the teamwork section. Therefore, we took away that we must break the teamwork section into intentional sections to facilitate the best possible idea development for teams. Thirdly, participants mentioned that the mentors often repeated the same questions that other mentors had asked, or that they were not actively participating in giving them advice. Therefore, we took away that the mentors in the future should be split into smaller groups and to implement a schedule to enable the highest efficiency for mentor-participant interactions. And lastly, participants mentioned that they wanted less speaker time. Therefore, we took away that we should propose a revised speaker section that has more interactive speakers and panels for increased engagement with the audience. The third and final phase was the post-event assessment phase, beginning after the completion of the event. We completed a post-mortem activity 1 day post-event. The post-mortem activity enabled us to analyze the weekend and decide upon concrete changes that we wanted to implement. With the completion of the post-mortem activity, we completed the 2021 Climathon Venice planning cycle, as there was no planning that occurred during the months of January to June.
This brings us to our planning cycle for future editions of the Climathon Venice. The outer line in this diagram shows the new planning phases, which have 6 phases rather than 3, as it had been in 2021. We created an event planning guide to implement this repeatable cycle framework. This holds all necessary timelines, templates, and guidance for future organizers. This will give them more opportunity to focus on the different aspects of the event rather than the mundane tasks. This is our yearly cycle with the monthly objectives that we created. Beginning in January, our first phase is logistics setup and carries through March. Within this phase, there needed to be a longer time spent planning, therefore our new cycle plan begins in January. In addition to this, we provide a planning timeline with deadlines in the event planner guide. The second phase deals mainly with recruitment and advertisement, and this phase goes from April through August. Concluded from our surveys, interviews, and observations, we wanted to implement a greater focus on networking and advertising. This was accomplished through a new pre-event in July, which will be a networking event for potential participants. The next phase is from September up until the Climathon weekend. Within the lead up to the Climathon, we decided to have the main focus be communication. This entails email and social media templates and timelines, all within the event planner guide, so that the participants are kept up to date and to attract new participants as well. Our next phase brings us to the Climathon weekend. During the weekend, we implemented less time for speakers and a more engaging speaker time in the form of a panel-style speaker block. This will be changed into the agenda that we proposed for the upcoming Climathon, which can be found in the event planner guide. Another change we will be implementing during the Climathon weekend is more structured teamwork. From looking at other Climathons and gathering feedback on the past Climathon, we decided that participants needed more guidance and structure to their teamwork time. We created a researching phase, a business modeling phase, and a pitch preparation phase. We then have our post-event assessment phase taking place after the Climathon weekend. This phase will involve more post-event outreach by providing timelines to talk to the top teams and interview participants. This way, we can assure that they are getting the assistance they need into taking their ideas further, as well as gathering feedback on the event. Following the post-event outreach, the incubation phase begins. This is where serendipity takes over to help top ideas from the event access the resources they need to develop into viable startups. All of these recommendations embedded within the Climathon planning cycle will create more opportunities for generating climate-based startups.
The final phase within the planning cycle is when the organizers will update the Climathon Venice archive, which we mentioned earlier. The Climathon Venice archive is made up of an archival website and presentations which summarize each edition of the Climathon. We also transformed these presentations into a physical booklet that can be used for advertisement. One aspect of the Climathon Venice archive is a video library with learning modules. The topics of these videos include developing a business model, pitch preparation, and other useful topics for the event. The intent behind creating this is to help participants develop skills that will be useful in creating projects with more potential. Another aspect of the website is that it is a centralized website solely for the information on the Climathon Venice. This portion is dedicated to the upcoming Climathon, with subtabs on pre-events, event prizes, and other details about the event. We also have all the past 6 editions of the Climathon Venice in the archive. For each edition, we provide the overall challenge and focuses, collaborators of the event, the team presentations including the winners, and the event agenda. This exposes potential participants to the ideas that have already been generated and can create more enthusiasm to participate. The archive will also contain the scoring criteria and event agenda for the upcoming Climathon long in advance. This will allow participants to enter the event with a more goal-oriented mindset, as they will understand what it is that the judges are looking for. Another feature on the archive is a background of the Climathon. In this section, we discuss why climathons are important and how they can positively impact Venice. The intent of this is to show participants why developing these ideas is important, and we hope it will increase passion and enthusiasm for joining the event. All of these aspects and many more are included with the Climathon Venice archive, with the hope that it will help to recruit more participants. All of the guidance, templates, and suggestions that we have developed for the organizers of the event are housed within the event planner guide. Now we can show you a demo of an example of how the organizers would use the planner guide. So the organizers would start off on the main page, which has instructions on how to use the planner guide and how it's structured. The next page in the event planner guide is a new cycle preparation page. This event planner guide can be repeated year after year, and this page has instructions to do that. The next page is a page with accounts that the organizers can use to plan. One being a Canva account, which is a software that can be used to create social media posts, flyers, pamphlets, and other visual aspects of the event. Here we already have some templates made for the organizers. Another account we've created is the Climathon Google Drive. Within the Google Drive is all of the documents that is needed to plan the Climathon. All of these documents can also be accessed through the planner guide in a more structured way. And the last section of the planner guide is the planning cycle. So here's an overview of the months and everything that needs to be completed in each month. For example, an organizer could go to January and see both things that need to be completed. They could then go to the preliminary budget, receive guidance on developing that budget, and then they could enter the template for developing the preliminary budget. This template in particular is interactive, with different functions in the Excel sheet to help add up money and calculate totals. Other templates are interactive as well. All the templates within the event planner guide are intended to help increase organization and increase ease of planning the event. If you would like to explore more of the event planner guide, you can access it through the QR code on the screen. You will be able to see only the structure of the website, and the organizers of the next Climathon will have access to the planning documents. So with this new cycle, we believe that there will be a greater chance for more startups to be developed from the incubation period with the support of serendipity. Consequently, there will be a greater chance for more climate-based startups to be generated as a result of Climathon Venice. We would like to thank you for taking the time to listen about our project. If you would like to learn more about the project overall, you can visit our team website with the link on the screen. If there are any questions, we would be happy to answer them now, or you can email our team alias on the screen.
Congratulations, this was a great presentation. Are there any questions on the chat by any chance? No, no questions on the chat for you guys. Any questions from the audience or comments? Anything? Again, these presentations and all the connected results and reports will all be available on the team's website as well as on the VeniceProjectCenter.org as soon as they're completely finished in about a week or so. And so look for them there, as well as on YouTube channel for the recordings of these presentations. So now we're going to take another break. Those of you who are at home, hang tight. We have the next presentation coming at 5:30. So until then, we'll take another pause and see you in a bit.
let's put it here because
He knows
they
how to.
don't know they're gonna trip over.
He knows how to handle mic cords.
No, sorry. Did you actually just put it there?
No,
Sorry.
I just untangled it.
Oh, you were entangled. Perfect.
I can't allow it.
Of course. Please, thank you.
Regardless of what you said. Manca Fabio.
Good evening again. We're back again for the third of the four presentations of the results of the research of the 2021 cohort of Worcester Polytechnic Institute students that were in Venice since October of this year. And today, as a reminder, the theme is the environment. And the next team is going to present their research on the green spaces of Venice. Come on down.
Good evening, everyone. We are a team of university students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute working alongside the organization We Are Here Venice in order to promote the sustainable stewardship of green spaces in Venice. My name is Margot Schassler. I'm working alongside Michael Rideout, Hope Hutchinson, and Alana Miska. From a bird's eye view, Venice does not appear to be very green. We can see mostly canals and buildings. However, there are over 500 green spaces scattered throughout the historic city alone. This map is from Conoscere Venezia, an organization that offers data on green spaces in Venice. There are other similar resources currently available, yet there is not one database that includes every green space in the city or thorough information on the space's offerings. That is why our project goal is to provide Venetians with informational resources to promote the sustainable stewardship of green spaces. In order to accomplish this goal, we collected data on green spaces through site visit surveys, visualized this data in an interactive Google map, and displayed this information in our online catalog. This picture on our slide is drone footage from our team on a site visit where we surveyed the Casa Ermete green space in Castello. Our team decided to focus on the Sestiere of Castello in the historic city, which is highlighted here in green. WPI already has some green space data itself. In 2017, a WPI team recorded 290 green spaces alongside their sponsor, Fattoria Urbana Diffusa. Shown here is a map of the green spaces cataloged by this team, which contains about 321,000 square meters of green space. As we can see, this project was mainly focused on inventorying green spaces on the island of Giudecca. Our project is a continuation of this work, focusing solely on the Sestiere of Castello. This map is the result of our team's data collection. In total, we found there to be 182 green spaces in Castello, which brings the total amount of green spaces mapped to be 472, and the total area of green spaces mapped to approximately 642,000 square meters. Our interactive map combines the previous Giudecca data with our own work in Castello and is available on our database website. Shown here is an example of all of the characteristics of green spaces that we would collect data on a site visit. This includes numerical data, including land area, location in terms of coordinates, and also elevation. It also includes more detailed descriptions of characteristics such as vegetation, amenities, and more. We also decided to focus on 3 main characteristics that we knew would be applicable to all potential green space organizations of interest. And these 3 are land condition, accessibility, and land type. The first major characteristic that we will look into is land type. Our first land type category was parks, of which we surveyed 27 in Castello. All public parks are currently maintained by Veritas, a publicly funded organization that manages utilities and environmental development in the city. We also found 32 gardens, 8 urban wilds, 2 farmlands, and 6 courtyards. Our full Costello green space map is shown here, color-coded to represent each land type. There were 107 spaces that could not be categorized due to inaccessibility. Now, let's look at a breakdown of the total land area comprised by each land type. Parks make up the overwhelming majority here at about 81% of the total land area, which is about 194,000 square meters. Most of these parks are open to the public and are formally maintained by Veritas, like I mentioned, which indicates that these spaces are already optimized. We want to point out here that urban wilds come in as the second largest total land area at about 8%, which is right around 18,400 square meters. Urban wilds are often land that is neglected and in need of stewardship. This is a significant amount of land with great reutilization potential, which is an important focus of our Sustainable Stewardship Initiative. By categorizing these lands as urban wilds, we will facilitate the process of matching stewards to available land.
Next, we'll take a look at land condition. Land condition was calculated based on 3 factors: maintenance, litter, and aesthetics, for which each space received a rating from 1 to 5. We used carefully defined criteria to ensure that we were accurate in every green space, and we calculated our ratings from these factors. The results were broken down into 5 classifications as follows. The lowest scoring condition was poor, of which we found 2 spaces. This picture shows an urban wild located behind an abandoned school. This is a good example of a poor space, as it's clearly been abandoned based on its lack of maintenance. We also found 2 fair spaces. This image is a courtyard located in front of an abandoned church. This space is also clearly abandoned, but still has some vegetation growing. We found 5 spaces to be in good condition. These are the most normal or average spaces. 23 spaces were great. These spaces tended to be well maintained and only had a few flaws. They generally had less litter and were better tended to. 13 spaces were outstanding. Most outstanding spaces were a lot larger, had a lot of healthy vegetation, little to no litter, and sometimes we even saw ground crews working on them while we were there. The remaining spaces that have not been ranked were not accessible and therefore could not be classified. Land condition is another tool by which stewards can select potential green spaces, as a lower land condition ranking likely indicates a space in need of new stewardship. Having this information be accessible helps stewards identify land in need of reutilization, again facilitating the matching of stewards to available land. And our final key characteristic was accessibility. We categorized the accessibility of each space into 3 different groups. The first group was no access, which means the space is completely inaccessible to the public. Many of these spaces we were unable to collect data on because we could not enter, so everything we have was from satellite footage or taken from afar. There were 116 of these spaces, making up 106,000 square meters of space. And our next category was limited access, which means the space is only open to the public depending on whether you have permission or if the space might have specific hours which it's open. Limited access green spaces made up the majority of the land area in Costello, with 126,000 square meters and 44 spaces. Finally, we have full access spaces, which means the space is accessible all the time, all day, every day. There were 22 of these spaces, making up almost 90,000 square meters of space in Costello. Now, it's important to note that while 28% of the green space area is not accessible to the public, 116 spaces are inaccessible. But this does not mean that the majority of the space in Costello is inaccessible, because 72% of the space is still at least somewhat accessible, and a lot of these spaces that we called limited access are still easily accessible. They just have some rules like limited hours.
Having collected this data, we created 2 informational resources to share this information with the public. First, we have a printed catalog. For those of you in H3 with us, we'll be passing that around now. For those of you streaming online or those in the back who it might take a little bit for the booklet to get to, there's a QR code in the bottom right hand of the screen, and that'll be on the next few slides as well. And it'll take you to our Google site where you can look at the online version of this catalog. So our catalog is split into two main sections, large spaces and smaller spaces. Shown here is an example of a large space display, which contains detailed information, as well as some photos and a map with the location of the green space highlighted. There are 3 spaces that are included in our large space section of the booklet. These include Giardini della Biennale, Parco della Remembranze, and Giardini Napoleonici, which will be shown in greater detail on the next slide. So as you can see, we start off with a short description of the space, as well as hours of operation, area, land condition, and average elevation. Next, we move on to accessibility, with more detailed notes on water, land, and handicap accessibility for the space. Our largest section is vegetation, which starts out with a general description of the vegetation that can be found here, as well as a breakdown into 7 main categories, which are crops, trees, shrubs and flowers, grass, weeds, and then we also included barren and walkways in this section. Each of these 7 sections has a estimated percentage of the land that they cover, as well as a list of the species that are present with a generalized number of the amount. Next, we have amenities. Starts off with just a list of things such as water supply, benches, playgrounds, and then we get into some more detailed notes on those amenities as well, such as there were 2 playgrounds in this park, each with a slide and a swing set. We finish off with a section for references. For established spaces such as this one, there's a website page on the Venice website where you can gain more information on this space. Next, we have an example of the smaller spaces pages. Smaller spaces were further divided up into areas of Castello. Each subsection starts with a reference map, which numbers the green spaces in that subsection from largest land area to smallest land area. The subsequent pages have 2 spaces each with all of the data that we collected, as well as a few photos. Again, these are smaller spaces, so less data was collected, and therefore it was able to fit on more than one per page. Our second informational resource is a website database that we created using Wix. So here we have a walkthrough of the website, which visualizes all of the data from the booklet. So this is the home page with our interactive map. You can drag around, click on spaces to see all of the data that we collected. We also have a link to our Explore page, which has our 4 different green space maps, as well as a browse by location section. So here we clicked on Castello, and we have a preview of all 182 spaces that we collected with a name, a picture, and a short description. We're actually going to go back to the home page and use our search bar. For example, you could type in Biennale, and you can find all of the spaces that have anything to do with the Biennale. So here we clicked on the space to get the full entry for that space. We have a full slide deck with all of the pictures that we took that each have a short description, as well as all that information we just went through that was in the booklet. So making this green space data available will benefit organizations interested in optimizing the reutilization of green spaces throughout Venice. Our sponsor, We Are Here Venice, and Fattoria Urbana Diffusa, who sponsored the 2017 Giudecca project, are 2 organizations that are interested in green space initiatives. Laguna nel Becchiere and Non Solo Verde are 2 steward organizations that have existing relationships with green spaces in Venice. Adoda un Aiuola is a program where individuals can adopt and care for a park in the city. And by including features such as the search bar and several versions of our interactive map with different filter layers, we can facilitate the matching of potential stewards to available green spaces. Improving the accessibility of green space knowledge in this way will maximize the potential for sustainable stewardship and land reutilization with an end goal of creating a more sustainable Venice. So now we'd like to discuss the concept of green deficit, which relates to the area of green space available per person. The World Health Organization recommends a minimum of 9 square meters of green space per person in any given area. And so if we consider just those areas that are full access in Castello, we get around 89,000 square meters. And with a population around 12,000 residents in Castello, our value comes out to 8.8 square meters per person, just below the recommended value of 9 square meters, and with a green deficit of 0.2 square meters. So now let's compare that value to that of full and limited access spaces combined to see if maybe opening some of these limited access spaces could improve that deficit. So including both full and limited, our total land area comes out to 215,000 square meters. And again, our population remains the same at about 12,000 residents. And our value jumps up to 19.2 square meters per resident, which well surpasses this international standard. But we're not seeing the full picture here, are we? Venice is a very touristic city with thousands of people traveling into and out of it every single day. Estimating that the population of Castello approximately doubles when tourists are included, and considering only those green spaces that are full access, our value jumps down to 4.4 square meters per person, which is well below this World Health Organization international standard. So again, let's look at maybe considering both the full and limited access spaces. Again, our population is around 24,000 people with both residents and tourists. And our land area is 215,000 square meters, giving us a value of 9.2 square meters, which is just over that international recommendation. Considering that a green deficit is present for full access spaces suggests that more green spaces should be made accessible to the public.
So all of this data that we just reviewed is for the entirety of Castello, which is the cistiary that contains the most green in the historic city and is home to all the largest parks. So that leads us to believe that these statistics aren't necessarily representative of the rest of the historic city. You can even see in just Castello alone that all of the green space is not evenly distributed throughout the entirety of the cistiary. It's also important to note that there is a high population of elderly within this historic city, and that makes it more difficult to travel to find green spaces when there are so many bridges and stairs that it takes to travel throughout the city. So as you can see, most of the green space is densely populated on the eastern end of Castello, but if we look to the western side, Castello Ovest, this side we see better represents the rest of the historic city and what that green space might look like. So this section of Castello only makes up about 11% of the green space area, and is most of the spaces are non-accessible. So let's continue that analysis of the green deficit in just Castello Ovest. There are only 2 full access spaces in Castello Ovest, and that only adds up to 432 square meters of green space. Estimating a population of about 6,500, this is not including tourists, that means that there is only 0.1 square meters of green space per resident in Castello Ovest. So given how low that number is, we also want to consider what it might look like if these limited spaces were opened up. So limited and full access spaces together make up 18,000 square meters of green space. Considering that same population, that brings our value up to 2.8 square meters of green space per resident. This is a large increase from before, however, this number is still very low. So we want to again consider if we added the no access spaces to this. So considering the total green space area in Castello Ovest, that brings our land area to 37,000, and considering the same population, our value is now 5.7 square meters of green space per resident. So what this tells us is that with the current amount of green space in Castello Ovest, there is not enough green space to reach that 9 square meters of green space per resident that the World Health Organization recommends. And again, this is not including tourists. So considering all of this data, we can conclude the following 4 things. First and most importantly, it means that it is vital that all of the green spaces are used to their highest potential. Because of the nature of the city, it would be difficult to add green spaces, so we must make the most of what green spaces are already present. Castello as a whole almost fulfills that recommendation of 9 square meters of green space, but it does not well represent the entire historic city because it is home to the majority of that open green space. Castello Ovest, which better represents the other sections of the historic city, is far below the standard that the World Health Organization recommends, and this is one section of the historic city in particular that is in need of green space reutilization to improve the quality of life for residents. Finally, the most efficient way to increase the amount of accessible green space in the historic city is to open up as many limited and no access spaces as possible. To focus on one space that could be opened up to the public, we looked at exgasometry. This is a space near Chiesa di San Francesco that is now privately owned and not accessible to the public. The plan currently in place for this space is to build a luxury hotel for tourists, which would take away from the green space that is available and also would contribute to the over-tourism in Venice. However, this is a large area, and if it were given that proper stewardship and turned into a park, for example, it would greatly benefit the city. If it is opened up to the public, the fully accessible green space area for Castello Ovest would increase by a factor of 10, which shows how much of a difference just one green space can make. So to conclude, we first completed an in-depth data set of all the green spaces in Castello, made easily accessible through our informational resources, which includes our website database and our printed catalog. We also determined that there is a vital need to improve green space access to the public, and the most efficient way to do this is by opening up those limited and no access spaces, as well as expanding upon existing steward connections to optimize utilization of the spaces that are present. Lastly, stewards can use our green space inventory to select spaces in need of reutilization using the tools and features on our website. Having this information that we collected readily available to assist the work of green initiative organizations will result in the promotion of a greener Venice. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. If you'd like to contact us and ask us any questions, our emails are on the screen, or we can open up the floor to any questions that you have now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a very informative presentation. Let's see if we have some questions. Is this for them or for the previous team? We'll answer those in a second, but maybe, I don't know if So Young from We Are Here Venice wants to say anything about this project. It was very interesting to see these deficit numbers, actually, and so I think we need to do something about this somehow. We Are Here Venice does already try to save some parks. Hopefully you can do more. Do you want to? You already told them everything? Okay. All right, so before we move to we'll take the next break before the last presentation, I think we have a question from a prior presentation. So thank you again. I will read it. This is from Boo Radley. This was on the chat of the YouTube channel, the streaming. Excellent presentations by all involved. I don't know, I don't think I know Boo Radley's. It's not like set up or anything. This is a real comment. I have a question about climate change in Venice. Is there a particular station gauge which corroborates the steady rise of the Med Sea due to climate change? And then there's also a follow-up question. You keep ready to answer the first part of the question? All right.
Well, I can answer both.
Oh, okay, then I'll enunciate the other piece of the question, which is, if there is such a gauge, is there either a public website with recorded data or a real-time streaming of the sea level gauges? Thank you.
So if you go to the official City of Venice website, it has both past data and current data for the tide level from the Centro Mare. So all of that can be accessible through the City of Venice website, and it'll show a real-time tide level, predicted highs and lows for the next couple days, and has historical data going back to 1872.
Well, Boo, if you're watching us again, I hope that answered your question. Feel free to contact us again for any other question. And so now we're going to take the last break before the final presentation, which is going to be at 6:15, and we'll see you then for the last presentation.
sente questo... No, adesso. Adesso che... Adesso si sente. Siamo dal vivo. Ho il microfono spento e ho l'immagine in. Si sente questo... Non sia qui. Se vuoi gli faccio collegare il...
good evening again. Thank you for connecting to our streaming of the final presentations of the teams of WPI students that were in Venice for the past 2 months. This is the last of the 4 presentations for today. A reminder, the 3 prior presentations were recorded and are available on our YouTube channel. So the last presentation was conducted for Crafted Italy, which is an organization that was founded to be headquartered in Venice and produce jobs and creativity for the city of Venice. And the teams explore the possibilities both in Venice and elsewhere for Crafta's expansion. So without further ado,
thank you. Good evening, everyone. We are a team of students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute working with Crafted Italy, and our project is to expand Crafted's business and craft partnerships locally and globally. My name is Patrick Mejia. This is Anshika Jain. This is Antonio Torres, and this is Madison Gass. The first thing we're going to discuss is the origin of Crafted, or what is Crafted. Crafted Italy is a digital production company. It was founded by our sponsor, Silvia Miazza, in 2020. They market and advertise for the clients here based in Venice, Italy. They work with M&C Saatchi in Milan, since Silvio is also a co-founder of M&C Saatchi in Milan. And they also work with local universities such as Ca' Foscari. This provides new opportunities to graduates to retain the student population in Venice. Crafted has 2 main goals now that they established themselves in Venice. The first is to begin their expansion into another Northern European city. The second goal is to establish partnerships with local sustainable startups in Venice. These goals will help the company thrive in the years to come. We have a short video from our sponsor that sums up Crafted's mission. Huh? Oh, yeah.
Be myself if you want, I can. Lip sync.
Oh,
yeah, I can lip sync to that.
Oh, no.
Can you say it in
Let's see.
It's in Italian.
I'm not sure. Check.
Can we put the mic on the speaker?
Yeah.
Just unplug it and just use the microphone that you have.
Okay.
To plug it onto the. Yeah. Yes. So
Okay.
actually, just rewind it.
Yeah. Yep. Let me just. It shouldn't be muted. Let's see if this works. It's fine. Okay.
Yeah. You can read the subtitles.
Yeah.
The rest would be Italian.
Sorry about this. Yeah. Oh yeah, so as previously discussed, Crafted is looking to provide opportunities for graduate students to retain the student population in Venice. So they paired up with Ca' Foscari, and this is where Silvio was saying that. and he looks for the best talents in the university, and when he finds them, he often would hire them. He would often hire them to work directly with some of his clients that he has at Crafted. And yeah. So our project mission is to assist Crafted in its diversification efforts by assessing its expansion potential and opportunities for partnerships with local sustainable startups. Looking at this diagram, we will be taking a look at the success of Crafted in Venice. Crafted's first steps was to establish a good location and get in touch with local universities in Venice. Silvio was able to establish connections with the Università Ca' Foscari, which allowed him to open up a masterclass here at H3. Using the masterclass, Silvio teaches the graduating students all the necessary skills to succeed in the digital production industry. He then began assisting MNC Saatchi clients in Milan using masterclass students at Crafted. Crafted's masterclass program has 10 students admitted at a time and teaches the necessary skills to succeed in the industry. If the student is exemplary during their time in the program, Crafted can hire them once they finish. Currently, Crafted has 16 employees hired after only a year of being founded. This year, Crafted has been working alongside companies such as Vodafone, Sky Network, DeLonghi, and Leroy Merlin, and they managed to make €1 million in revenue. Next, we're going to take a look at the right side of the diagram, which we will be talking about one of Crafted's current partnerships, which is Zero Farms. Zero Farms is a vertical farming company based in Pordenone, Italy. They farm their products inside of an enclosed environment inside of their warehouse, and they grow their products aeroponically without the use of any substrates. They are a client-based company, which means that they produce based on what each customer requests. Zero Farms is unique for a variety of reasons. Not only are they a vertical farming company, but they are also known for their digital technology. They created a controlled environment specific to the product they're trying to grow using a software called Root. They designed Root to monitor and control the enclosed environment and the products that they grow. Zero Farms also uses modular architecture in their warehouse to preserve space and allow for more products to be grown at once. They use rows of vertical trays, which allows them to scale their products up depending on the needs of their client. Zero Farms has clients such as Barilla, which is famously known for their pasta and sauces. They grow vegetables and herbs for Barilla's sauces, and for their most recent project, they grew basil as an ingredient for one of Barilla's ready-to-eat sauces. So how did Crafted meet Zero Farms for this partnership? Silvio met Daniela Modesto, the CEO of Zero Farms, at an event that Ca' Foscari hosted. Silvio was looking to create a sustainable brand that Crafted could market. Daniela was looking to sell his products that Zero Farms grows, but since Crafted has no need for the products, he offered to market and advertise for the products that they were planning to grow together instead. This led to the joint venture that the companies were looking for, where they created This Is Frank.
This diagram shows how Crafted partnered with Zero Farms and created the brand This Is Frank. Currently, both companies are focused on the lettuce project for This Is Frank. Zero Farms takes care of the lettuce production. Through experimentation, they have created an optimal recipe to grow lettuce through vertical farming. Crafted, on the other hand, takes care of branding and marketing of the product. They are responsible for its logo, social media, advertising, and packaging. Crafted uses creative captions to capture customers' attention, as shown on the picture on the left. It says, "Our lettuce has never touched the ground." Together, their target is to sell lettuce to 30 supermarkets in Milan by doing a trial run in January of 2022. Crafted is going to make profit on this joint venture by getting commission on every box of lettuce that is sold in the supermarket. Based on Crafted's success in Venice, the company wants to take their business model and duplicate it to other parts in Europe. In order to come up with the ideal city for expansion, our team came up with a list of 6 different factors that we took into consideration. It was essential that the city had an established main university and was near a large metropolitan area. Along with that, we also explored the cities that were near other MNC Saatchi locations. That way, Crafted could use MNC Saatchi as a backbone for their expansion through their strong client base. So the cities that we used for our criteria were Bordeaux, Valencia, Paris, Lund, Heidelberg, Edinburgh, and Aberdeen. To expand, Crafted needs a main university that it can partner with. It is also important that it is located with a 300-kilometer distance from a large metropolitan area, so that its employees could have the perks of being near a big city. Since Venice has both a well-established university and is located near Milan, the 7 cities that we explored also fit the minimum qualifications for expansion. After looking into the first 2 criteria, our top 2 deciding factors for expansion were factors 3 and 4: high unemployment rate and low 25th percentile hourly wage. As previously seen in the video, Crafted's goal is to repopulate the city and preserve the student population. The lack of job diversity and high unemployment rate are the main reasons for students to emigrate out of the city after graduation. COVID has skyrocketed the unemployment rate, and by expanding to a city with a higher rate, Crafted will be able to offer jobs to a city that is in need of opportunities. The second deciding factor was low hourly wage. We looked into the 25th percentile hourly wage as it was a close replica of the earnings of a recent college graduate. This data also reflected and correlated with the monthly cost of living in a city. It also showed that the lower hourly wage, the more people Crafted can support through its hirings. So expanding to a low-wage city could be better for their business. Based on the research, the 2 cities that were chosen for expansion were Bordeaux and Valencia. Both cities had the highest unemployment rate and the lowest hourly wage. Bordeaux has an unemployment rate of 8.1% with an hourly wage of 12.5 euros. Valencia has an unemployment rate of 17.26% with an hourly wage of 10 euros. Crafted plans to expand to both the cities. However, which city should it expand to first? MNC Saatchi Paris has more clients compared to MNC Saatchi in Barcelona and Madrid. By having more French clients than Spanish, it will be easier for Crafted to disperse to Bordeaux after Venice. By taking all these factors into consideration, Crafted's next city for expansion is Bordeaux, France. So what are the next steps? Crafted is going to use the same business model in Bordeaux as it did in Venice, starting off by introducing Crafted to Bordeaux University, then starting a masterclass for students, and finally hiring some of them to assist MNC Saatchi clients in Paris. By using these steps, Crafted will be able to duplicate its success in Bordeaux.
After picking the city for Crafted expansion, we take a look at the diagram and see below the partnerships, we have future partnership for Crafted to collaborate. And for this, we have 2 criteria. First criteria for Crafted's future partnership, or the 5th criteria for Crafted expansion, we take a look at key job sectors, specifically for Bordeaux. In Bordeaux, there are many job sectors, like any other city, but the main 4 that isolates Bordeaux from the rest are wine, tourism, laser and plasma technology, and agriculture. The second criteria for Crafted's future partnership, or the last criteria for Crafted's expansion, we take a look at sustainable partnership opportunities for Crafted can make in Bordeaux. In Bordeaux, we found 2 sustainable startups that Crafted can provide digital marketing services while expanding their client base. Both Acronym and Bordeaux entrepreneurs encourage entrepreneurship by helping local startups. They have partners like TEDx Bordeaux, La French Tech, and Quantel. For our third part of our project, we're going to talk about Crafted's current partnership and how can we fortify it. One of the main objectives to fortify the current partnership with Zero Farms is to expand their current brand, This is Frank. To expand This is Frank, we decided on 4 important requirements that matches the selected produce